Welcome to the deep dive.
Free to be here.
Today we're jumping into the 1920s, an amazing decade, often called the Jazz Age.
Truly transformative. Yeah.
And what we really want to explore is this significant shift, this change in how African Americans were expressing themselves, in American culture and society.
It's a fascinating period because so many things came together. Migration, new ideas, artistic energy, it really set the stage.
Right. We've got some material here that touches on this, looking specifically at how African American voices really started to, resonate across the nation.
Made a huge impact.
So our mission today is to kind of unpack how that expression evolved and why it was so powerful during this dynamic decade.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Okay, let's start with something foundational, the Great Migration. It seems like a huge factor. Can you maybe paint a picture of what that looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. The Great Migration was, it was a massive movement. We're talking huge numbers of African Americans moving from the southern states, primarily rural areas, up to the industrial cities in the North and Midwest.
And this was happening around World War I and into the 20s.
Exactly. It really picked up steam around the war years and just kept going strong through the 1920s. Think Chicago, Detroit, New York City, places like that were major destinations.
So what was pushing them out of the South and pulling them towards the North? What were they hoping for?
Well, there were definitely push and pull factors. The North offered industrial jobs, factory work, which just wasn't widely available in the largely agricultural South. That was a big pull.
Better economic opportunities.
For sure. But the push factors were just as strong, maybe stronger. They were escaping really oppressive conditions, Jim Crow segregation, the constant threat of racial violence like lynching, and just severely limited economic and social prospects.
So it wasn't just about finding a job. It was about finding, dignity, safety.
Absolutely. It was a search for a better life in a very fundamental way, escaping a system designed to hold them down.
And when large numbers of people moved like this and settled in these northern cities, what was the effect? Did it change the dynamic in those cities?
Oh, profoundly. It led to the growth of these really vibrant, concentrated African-American communities in urban centers. Places like Harlem in New York became incredibly important.
Why was that concentration so key?
Because it created these hubs. Hubs for sharing ideas, for artistic collaboration, for building institutions, and crucially, for fostering a stronger sense of collective identity and consciousness. It laid the groundwork for so much that followed.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, within this changing landscape, different leaders emerged with different ideas about the best way forward. Let's talk about two really prominent ones, Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. They had quite different philosophies, right?
Very different, yes. Let's start with Washington. He was a major figure, really influential earlier on, though his ideas were still debated in the 20s.
What was his core message?
Washington advocated for, essentially, economic self-sufficiency through vocational training. He believed African Americans should focus on learning practical skills, farming, trades, crafts, things that would make them economically valuable.
So build from the ground up, economically speaking.
Pretty much. His philosophy is often described as gradualism and accommodation. He argued that by proving their economic worth and, being industrious and reliable members of society, Black people would gradually earn respect and eventually civil rights.
So not pushing for immediate social equality.
Not directly. No, he wasn't calling for immediate political confrontation. It was more about demonstrating value first.
Yeah.
And of course, he founded the Tuskegee Institute, which was all about providing that kind of practical vocational education.
Okay. Then you have W.E.B. Du Bois. How did his view contrast with Washington's?
Du Bois represented a fundamentally different approach. He was an intellectual, a sociologist, and he argued passionately for immediate and full civil rights, political representation, and end to segregation right now.
No gradualism there.
None. He believed waiting was unjust and wouldn't work. He advocated for persistent agitation, for demanding equality. He famously disagreed quite publicly with Washington on this.
And he had this idea about the talented 10th, right? What was that?
Yes. Du Bois believed that the path forward would be led by an educated elite within the Black community, the talented 10th. He emphasized the need for higher education, for developing Black intellectuals, artists, and professionals who could lead the fight for equality.
So leadership driven by education and intellect versus Washington's focus on broader vocational skills.
Exactly. And Du Bois wasn't just talking, he was acting. He was a key figure in founding the NAACP.
Right, the NAACP. Let's touch on that. What was its main goal?
The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, founded back in 1909, had a very clear mission: fight for the civil rights of African Americans. Simple as that, but incredibly difficult work.
And how did they go about it? What were their methods?
Their primary tools were legal and political action. They challenged discriminatory laws in court fighting segregation, voting restrictions, things like that. They lobbied politicians, worked to raise public awareness about racial injustice, especially lynching.
Using the system to try and change the system.
Precisely. They focused on systemic change through legal challenges and political pressure. And Du Bois, as editor of their magazine, The Crisis, was absolutely central to shaping their message and strategy in those early, crucial years.
So you have these major figures and organizations, but there were also individuals whose courage really stood out. Ida B. Wells, for instance.
Oh, Ida B. Wells, an incredibly brave and important figure. She was a journalist and activist who just relentlessly investigated and exposed the horror of lynching.
That must have been incredibly dangerous work.
Unbelievably dangerous. She meticulously documented cases, challenged the false narratives used to justify lynchings, and published her findings, demanding justice. She put her own life on the line repeatedly.
And she took her fight beyond the U.S., too.
She did. She traveled internationally, speaking out, trying to raise global awareness about the brutality happening in America, hoping to bring pressure from the outside as well. A truly fearless advocate.
Okay, so we've seen advocacy through education, legal action, journalism. Now let's shift to Marcus Garvey. He offered yet another path, right? A very different kind of message.
Very different, yes. Marcus Garvey was this incredibly charismatic leader. He championed Black nationalism and Pan-Africanism.
What did that mean in practice?
His core message was about Black pride, self-reliance, and unity. He urged Black people to build their own businesses, their own institutions, to be economically independent from white society. He fostered a powerful sense of racial pride.
And the Pan-Africanism part.
That was about connecting Black people globally,
Mm.
fostering a sense of shared destiny. And for Garvey, it also included the idea of eventually some form of return to Africa, establishing a powerful, independent Black nation or presence there.
A really bold vision. Did people respond to this?
Massively. He founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA, and it became a huge movement, attracting hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of followers, especially among the working class. His message of pride and self-determination really resonated with people feeling marginalized.
Wow. So you have all these currents, migration, differing leadership philosophies, activism, Black nationalism. It feels like a real ferment of ideas and energy.
Exactly. And a lot of this energy, particularly the artistic and intellectual side, found an incredible focus in one particular place and time: the Harlem Renaissance.
Ah, yes, the Harlem Renaissance. Such an iconic term. Can you break down what that actually was?
Sure. Simply put, it was this amazing flowering, this explosion, really, of African-American artistic and intellectual life centered in the Harlem neighborhood of New York City during the 1920s.
So art, music, writing.
All of it: literature, poetry, novels, plays, music, jazz, blues, visual arts, dance, theater, intellectual debate. It was an incredibly fertile period.
What was the significance of it? Why was it more than just, a bunch of artists living in the same place?
It was a conscious movement in many
Yeah.
ways. It was about defining and expressing a modern Black identity. It provided a platform for African Americans to articulate their experiences, their heritage, their hopes, their struggles, with newfound confidence and creativity, often challenging stereotypes head-on.
Celebrating Black culture.
Absolutely. Celebrating it, exploring it, and asserting its value on the American cultural stage. It was a declaration of presence, of cultural richness.
And some truly towering figures emerged from this. Langston Hughes, for example. What made him so central?
Langston Hughes is maybe one of the most recognizable voices of the Renaissance. He was a poet, playwright, novelist, and his work really captured the lives, the language, the rhythms of everyday working-class African Americans.
What was unique about his style?
He deliberately drew on Black musical traditions, especially jazz and blues. You could feel the rhythms in his poetry. And crucially, he used the vernacular, the everyday speech of the people he was writing about. He wasn't trying to sound like, established white poet.
Making it authentic.
Deeply authentic.
Yeah.
It resonated because it felt real. He gave voice to the beauty and the pain of Black life in America.
Then there's Zora Neale Hurston, another giant of the era. How did her work fit in?
Zora Neale Hurston was fascinating, a brilliant writer, but also a trained anthropologist. Her work often focused on celebrating Black folklore and culture, particularly in the rural South where she grew up.
So a different focus than Hughes's urban settings sometimes.
Often, yes. She collected folk tales, studied dialects, and incorporated that richness into her novels and stories, like her famous novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God. She really championed the unique cultural expressions found within Black communities.
And her characters.
Often incredibly strong, independent figures, especially women. She
Mm.
wasn't afraid to use authentic dialect, which was controversial then, but it was key to capturing the voices she wanted to represent. She showed the vibrancy and resilience of Black folk culture.
Okay, so literature was huge, but you can't talk about the Jazz Age without talking about the music. And Louis Armstrong.
Ah, Satchmo. Yeah, Louis Armstrong. He's just monumental, a true genius of jazz. His trumpet playing and his singing fundamentally changed music.
How so? What was his impact?
Well, his technical brilliance on the trumpet was astounding, but it was also his improvisational skill, his sense of swing, his phrasing. He basically showed everyone the possibilities of jazz as a solo art form, and his singing, that gravelly voice, was so unique and full of emotion.
And he became popular beyond the Black community, right?
Hugely popular. He had this incredible charisma, this infectious joy in his performance. He was one of the first Black entertainers to achieve widespread crossover appeal, bringing jazz to a massive white audience, too. He really helped bridge some racial divides through his music.
Which leads us to jazz itself. It's the name of the era, after all. Can you describe what jazz is for anyone less familiar?
Sure. Jazz is this unique American musical art form, born out of African-American communities, especially in New Orleans, around the turn of the 20th century. It blends African rhythms, blues sensibilities, and European harmonies.
Key features.
Improvisation is key musicians making up melodies on the spot. Syncopation, that offbeat rhythm that makes you want to move, and often that bluesy feeling, the call and response patterns. It's expressive, dynamic, very alive.
And why did it explode in the 1920s?
It just captured the spirit of the times, the energy of the rebellion against older norms, the fast pace of urban life. It spread like wildfire thanks to phonograph records and radio. It was played in speakeasies, dance halls. It became the soundtrack of the decade.
And a major cultural contribution.
Absolutely. A profoundly important contribution of African-American culture to America and the world. It challenged musical conventions and remains a vital art form today.
Okay, so bringing this all together. Looking back at the 1920s, what's the big picture? How did the voice of African Americans truly transform?
Well, you see all these threads weaving together. The Great Migration concentrated people and talent, creating fertile ground in places like Harlem for the Renaissance to bloom.
Right, it provided the setting.
Exactly. Then you had the clash and conversation between leaders like Washington and Du Bois, pushing different strategies for advancement, while organizations like the NAACP fought legal battles, and activists like Ida B. Wells bravely exposed injustice.
So political and social activism was gaining momentum.
Definitely. And Garvey's movement added another dimension, emphasizing that powerful urge for self-determination and racial pride.
And the arts reflected all this.
The Harlem Renaissance was a cultural manifestation of this new spirit. Writers like Hughes and Hurston gave voice to the diversity of Black experiences, moving beyond old stereotypes, celebrating their heritage.
And the music.
Jazz, powered by geniuses like Armstrong, wasn't just entertainment. It was a revolutionary art form that broke down barriers, influenced all of American culture, and announced a vibrant, modern Black creativity to the world.
So the key takeaway is?
The 1920s marked a period where African Americans were asserting their identity, their culture, and their demands for equality in new, louder, and more diverse ways than ever before. They were actively shaping their own narrative.
And setting the stage for future struggles.
Absolutely. Much of the groundwork for the later civil rights movement was laid during this incredible decade of change and expression. It was a profound shift.
A truly pivotal time. Okay, to wrap up and help everyone process this, here are a few questions maybe to ponder.
Good idea.
First, what were those main reasons behind the Great Migration, and how did that movement really help change the voice of African Americans?
Thinking about that connection.
And then can you sort of compare and contrast the approaches of Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois? How did their different ideas shape the fight for racial advancement?
Yeah, their differing philosophies are key.
How did the Harlem Renaissance act as a platform? Like, what did it do for the changing voice of African Americans back then? Maybe think of specific people and what they contributed.
Hughes, Hurston, the artists.
Yeah. And the music? How did jazz specifically reflect what was happening? How did it contribute to this evolving African American voice during the Jazz Age?
The sound of the era.
Right. And finally, just thinking broadly, what were the big issues, the hopes, the aspirations that were really driving this whole transformation in the 1920s? What was fueling that change?
What was underneath it all? Good questions to reflect on.
Definitely. So take some time with those. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive into such a remarkable chapter of American history.
My pleasure. It's a crucial story to understand.